There's some light for you.
All right, we left off yesterday talking about the Italian Renaissance with Michelangelo at the helm. He is the one to sort of garner the new Renaissance for Rome. So he goes from Florence to Rome, and this is sort of he becomes sort of the establishment painter and sculptor for this building project in Rome by St. Peter's Basilica, Sistine Chapel, these big sort of ventures by the 16th century. Leonardo represents older forms, Donatello even more old, Raphael contemporary, but a little bit older in the sense that his favor and his sort of style is going to be more conservative than what Michelangelo produces. Michelangelo really embodies the spirit of what we would call the High Renaissance in Italy. So he establishes that Christian Neoplatonism, that Neoplatonic idea that God is the one creating the art. I'm just discovering it, and I'm discovering it based on the beauty of the human form. So connecting classical views with Christianity, you get a very pious version of sort of paganism. Now, Botticelli is, I would say, the closest intellectual equivalent to Michelangelo from the early Renaissance. So Botticelli and Michelangelo are very similar in their sort of setup. But Michelangelo is going to take it to a greater extent because he's going to integrate completely Christian iconography with this sort of neoclassical, or this excuse me, that can be confusing, a classical revival. So the two together perfectly harmonize. For instance, you see with this work here what could come out of the classical era. It looks every bit as Greek as the sort of wet drapery view of the Parthenon. Their character has this sort of flowing garb. And we also have something that looks like it could come out of the Hellenistic period. This overly exaggerated sort of Dionysian emotive state of Jesus. So he's very much in his sort of his pose, his gesturing, is conveying some type of really intense emotion. Now, ultimately, though, our characters are not wailing hysterically. So even though there's an intensity to the emotion, they are still in a fairly controlled state. So we have emotion that's controlled, and which gives it more of a classical as opposed to a Hellenistic sort of backdrop. Our characters look almost at peace with what's happened, because you're not meant to see like the intensity of the moment by their over display of it. It's about the message conveyed in the two figures interacting with each other. So what I'm saying is, unlike something like the Rothgen Pieta, which is trying to emphasize the intensity of the grief as well as exaggerate the wounds of Jesus, this work here shows much more of a Renaissance as opposed to sort of a Middle Ages Platonism. You're looking at almost the beauty of the grief as opposed to sort of the ugliness of it. So, yes?
Okay, so the head in the other one looks too big for them. Like their head,
Now, why would that be?
because they're trying to emphasize.
You're trying to emphasize the part of the head, that's showing the expressions the most. So you emphasize hands and head, and the body becomes frail and weak in comparison. You don't see that happen as much in this work. In fact, where would you say and why would you say the emphasis is where it is in this work from Michelangelo? Who or what is being emphasized in Michelangelo's Pieta? Beatrice. Now, why is that?
Because of his, the way that he displays it. Like he's dead. I think that's funny.
So you're saying that because... Yeah, go ahead.
Honestly, it's kind of like comes across
Okay, it's not contrapposto, but there's something about the form not being stiff or rigid. There's sort of a natural contour that your eye follows. And certainly because he is sort of on the foreground and in the center, he seems to be the emphasis. Could you make a counter argument or something about whether or not Mary is the emphasis and why? Lorraine?
Well, did you say that Michelangelo was a Neoplatonist?
Right, so Neoplatonic or Neoplatonist is his philosophy.
When we were looking at that one picture, and you said that Plato, I think, was pointing upward, and then
Yes.
the other guy was pointing downward. Well, I noticed that Mary's looking downward while Jesus is looking upward.
Oh, that's an interesting point. And I actually hadn't thought of it like that. But eye direction might be interesting and symbolic. Jesus is dead. He's looking upward, suggesting maybe the open face to heaven. Open face is a whole gesturing system in which you're expecting things in the world as opposed to brooding or thinking inside of yourself. Whereas Mary might be contemplating Jesus and so looking downward in grief. And obviously a very beauteous, simplistic, or beauteous, almost stoic grief. But she's not wailing like this character here. She's not like in this intense furrowing. So that might be something to consider in the work. Very good. And you can certainly talk about that.
I like her hand.
Her hand is open almost in acceptance or some other type of display, state of display.
It's a triangle.
Oh, very good. So we got the pyramidal construction going on. That helps us a little bit. Character is definitely built up. And just consider how the proportion of the characters. What do you notice about the proportion?
Mary is larger than Jesus.
Much, much larger. So we have Mary literally established as a throne. Very good. I love that. That would be a great adjective to describe in your analysis if you were to do a free response question. That Mary almost acts as a throne to Jesus. She is a seat for him to be displayed and honored. And what better way, I guess, to describe in the Roman Catholic descriptions of Mary, the seat of Jesus, right? The Theotokos, the God-bearer. In this case, she's bearing him not as a child, but as a full-grown adult. Michelangelo, by the way, producing not an older Mary, but an eternally youthful Mary. So this would be a Mary of sort of the perfect, beauteous state of her 14, 15, 16, whatever, her youth. So she's a fountain of youth herself. And her flowing garb that's sort of enfolding underneath Jesus is again sort of a symbol of the church. Mary is a symbol of the church itself, that it bears Jesus for the people. So Pietà takes on multiple meanings. From just the symbolic iconography, it's talking about Jesus and Mary, their interaction together, the emotion that the audience is supposed to feel. The sort of perfect setup from the Renaissance would be sort of the second meaning, and the third would be the cultural meaning. That is, it's like telling us about the Roman Catholic Church, what it values, what it's trying to get you to value as well. Yes?
What is that by Jesus' foot?
That looks like a third foot.
It's
All right,
It's
here?
probably like a tree.
No,
stump.
it's just drapery against some of the stonework here.
Oh.
So we have an interesting contrast between the stone and drapery here that's being done here. Michelangelo loves contrast or juxtaposing textures. And another key feature, last one before we move on, of Michelangelo's work is just how smooth he gets the Carrara stone. This will be a very key feature because he produces a high quality surface, which means he sands it and polishes it to the point of glossiness, where it's like glass if you were to touch it.
Glazing.
And it's not a glaze, but so it's not. Are you saying like glazing as in painting, or it feels like a glaze? So when you're done with it, it sort of feels like it's like a polishing. So very good. And this is characteristic of Michelangelo, that everything is very, very smooth in his works. I should say usually all the human or the flesh elements are smooth, almost as if they're shining. It's an interesting reflective thing that happens too when you make it shiny like that, like they got body oil on or something. Yes.
I also noticed that Mary's hand is pointed is in a gesture like way, so that would be the Christogram.
Okay, this isn't a Christogram, but it's close. It has sort of a natural symbol, the open gesture, the open palm. You might call it like an orant position, which is like an open palm prayer position. So that certainly is the case here. But her hand here is bearing Christ right on the side, and it's almost like he's weightless in her, like huge folds of her, drapery and whatever. She's doing it effortlessly, holding him up. Dominic and then Beatrice.
It's kind of like that hand is kind of like pointing to Jesus, or people think it's saying, here is Christ.
Yeah, she's presenting him to the audience. Very good, Beatrice.
What did you say that Michelangelo loves when you're describing what extra
The new way to describe. I'm not sure. What did I say?
you were talking about the circus, and then actually asked about that thing that was like an extra leg, and then you said Michelangelo loves.
Oh, he likes juxtaposing textures. Meaning he likes textures that are rough hewn, but then also certain areas are highly rendered or polished to the point of glistening or glassy. So rough hewn from glassy. It's a good example of the untrapping of the form from the stone. Ashley.
If you look at both of see his hand closest to us and then Mary's hand,
Yeah.
they're both like very detailed. Like you can see the veins
Yes.
and the tendons.
And that's a good approach to usually any of these Ninja Turtles I mentioned. Look at the hands, right? If you can see that the character is anatomically correct in the sense that his hands have all the sort of underlying sinews and ligaments and veins produced with it, you're looking at a master. You're looking at someone who cares about these subtle forms. They can produce them because to create delicacy out of such strong stone is nearly impossible if you weren't incredibly practiced and skilled. So Michelangelo produces this with great clarity. We'll be seeing it both with his work and then his sort of intellectual predecessor, who will be someone like Gio Lorenzo Bernini, who introduces the Baroque period in Italy. Now, not everybody enjoyed the work or appreciated it in quite such a way as you do when you look at it. But to be fair, you're probably not crazy. There was a man in the 1970s who actually hopped the little fence, I suppose, that they keep in front of the Pieta, which is currently displayed in the St. Peter's Basilica, which is open to thousands of tourists a year, right? And he took a hammer out, and that's what he did to the work. So this is Michelangelo's Pieta right after the scene in which he is tackled by the security.
Whacked off the hand.
And he knocked off her entire hand and also took a couple whacks at her face, so her face kind of got the plastic surgery treatment in the worst way possible. So they had to take all those pieces. Can you imagine the restorative work that's required? Taking each piece, sticking it back into place, reconstructing. They actually do a pretty good job. So this is actually after that damage was done. You can see if you really get really close, you can see the hairline fractures, but they were able to restore most of the work. Well, you're mentally unstable. This actually happens to several works throughout history. So we'll look at them. Edvard Munch's The Scream was literally stolen for like 3 or 4 months. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. That guy who's like it's like orange and blue and green. He's like that kind of thing. He's like his body's all wiggly. You know that painting?
Yeah.
That painting was actually stolen out of the museum in Stockholm by gunpoint. They had all these assault rifles. Stole the work, and it was this big art heist. It's a famous art heist. No one knows who or what or why, but then they found it 4 months later in a dumpster. How did it get, whatever. Someone knew that it was too hot to whatever. I don't know how it worked, but they found it again and restored it. So I finally was able to see it, although I wasn't. There was one time I went because it was already stolen, and then they recovered it, and I got to see it. So that was cool. Same thing happened to Rembrandt that we'll talk about. This big Rembrandt, someone takes a knife to it, just cuts it up. So this happens from time to time with mentally unstable people around famous works of art. I'm not sure why they do this. They just do it. I lost my clicker. Oh. Well, now there's a piece of really nice museum glass that is sort of there. It's not really you can just run around it, but it acts as a deterrent, I guess. Certainly from people secretly throwing stuff at it or whatever. You imagine thousands of tourists you know, even at your school, I mean, you're all nice people, but then you get certain people in a bathroom and they're just like etching their name into whatever they want. It's just a weird thing, but it's like it's happened throughout history. I saw petroglyphs throughout Santa Fe, and some of them look really cool, but some of them look like just straight up like, you know, some peed on a rock, and then they, you know, back in the Neolithic period or whatever, and then they like you know, Cro-Magnon was here or something like that. So there's a lot of scratchy graffiti even in the old world too. So people like to hurt things. I don't know what it is. This was commissioned by a cardinal. You don't need to know his name, but this was supposed to be for his tomb. So a lot of these commissioned works from Michelangelo early on, his early works like the Pietà, are produced by sort of higher up cardinals and bishops that want stuff for their graves, and Michelangelo provides this for him. And it's sort of hit or miss if they pay him depending on when they die or when they want to finish the work. So there's a lot of issues with grave markers. It's not the best kind of commission you can get. It's very precarious for lots of reasons when you're dealing with death. The big thing is that surface that has a high detail, polished, very complete. The texture is very sensitive to the whole work. You can see here clearly that how it reflects the museum light that's on it currently. Mary is younger than Jesus, which is a perpetual youth teaching that is being described. That's part of the cultural value behind the work. Yes?
Okay, so you know how you said it reflected the light?
Yes.
Is that on purpose? Is that why he polished it so it would like kind of take in the light and reflect it?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is a reason for having high polish, is that it actually produces a luminosity. Yeah, for sure. Not just for a touch, but for luminosity. Here's some interesting artistic pictures of the Pietà, probably with some touch up as well. But I like this work because it doesn't just show sort of the glossy features, it also kind of shows the supple quality to the work with that shading. With good lighting and good shading, you actually can see the contour of the work very, very well, more so than you can see in its normal setting. To kind of have some dramatic lighting there, you get a sense of just what sophistication Michelangelo's producing in the work. So particularly this one right here, where you see the folds of the hair. This is of high quality, right? So this is a high quality, innovative way of producing negative space. This within the hair and the texturing of the hair, and as well as the forming of the gesture of our two characters here, as they are in their sort of subtle sort of feelings, I guess. Subtle gesturing of feelings. If you want to see a what is it?
Copy?
It's a copy, but it's more than that. It's sort of a, what is the word? It was one of those allowed replicas or certified replicas. I guess I'll go with that. There's a church, there's a Roman Catholic church in Corona that actually has a certified copy of the Pietà. There's only like 20 of them in the world, certified copies, and they happen to have gotten one. So I don't know how you get to see it, but if you want something that's essentially the same as seeing Michelangelo's Pietà, it's over in Corona. It's pretty cool. I think it's called St. Mary's or something. It's not an apple. That's what it looks like, but we'll see it from a different angle to see what it's like.
It's a peach. It looks like it's probably armor, like a weapon, slung around his shoulder.
It looks like
Remember Neoplatonism. Remember the rough-hewn walls that are being released. The apparition and beauty that is underneath it. He wants people to see what he sees and discovers. So that's another quote from Michelangelo that introduces us to a second of his major works. Prior to his painting years, he is producing Michelangelo's David, which again is one of those, I think in ways much more exceeding Leonardo's Mona Lisa, is the monumental statue of the David. For a variety of reasons, it's breaking all sorts of I guess, tradition at the time. It's sort of setting up new paradigms. So the biggest thing is that this is a monumental nude, which is unheard of by now, right? So you had Donatello, who established sort of the first of the Renaissance male nudes, which hadn't been seen for a long time. You got to cover up your bits and pieces for about 1,000 years. So we're past the Roman Empire now, and we finally are getting comfortable again with the naked form as beauteous.
Put a leaf on it.
No, don't ever put a leaf on
What?
that. Have I told you the story of the penis pope? No.
Yes, you smashed it off all the
Oh yeah, I did. Thank you. Yeah, I did. What?
Yeah, you told us
No,
that.
let not be explained.
There was a pope who went around telling everyone to go chisel off all around the Vatican all the Greek penises and then sticking cemented on a leaf. So whenever you see a work where there's a leaf on it, it's because of this particular pope. So somewhere down in the depths of the Sistine Chapel underneath where the pope does his sermon, there's probably crates and crates full of these penises. It's kind of a thing that, all right. Little fun fact of the Catholic Church, I guess. When the Medicis are exiled in Florence, we see all of these kind of issues going on at the turn of the century. Savonarola and the Borgia Pope are sort of at odds with each other, so there's a lot of political fervor, religious fervor at the time, and then corruption scandals and these kinds of things at the turn of the century. We have this push to try and fix Florence because there's all sorts of internal cohesion issues. There's all sorts of turmoil. And so we want to show that Florence as a government is a very strong, it's like there for the people. And so the Republic of Florence is what commissions the David, because you're trying to show that there's stability in the midst of all this chaos. So the Republic of Florence chooses, because they have David as sort of their main symbol, and there's lots of reasons for it. I think I mentioned a few with Donatello's. But they started the project, but then it was sort of decommissioned. They didn't have money or funds, or they didn't like where it was going. They stopped it. Michelangelo very rarely starts a project that someone else started, but the cornerstone is expensive. It's a tumultuous century beginning, and Michelangelo is desperate. So he takes the commission, despite it not being ideal. He likes to discover it himself from a clear, clean cuboid of stone. But so the project starts, and he continues it. And what he produces, based on the other person's gesturing that he kind of constructs, is pretty phenomenal. So he still does a good job of finishing the project. It's simply referred to as the giant. Right? And why is that? You guys are really whispering that? No. In fact, that's not the thing that's emphasized at all. Thank you for saying it correctly. Is that what you're going to say? The first monumental nude, and this is why it's called the giant. Okay. It's monumental. So the word monumental is what you need to do here. So let's describe the artwork here. Let's analyze it. What is David associated with? He's an Old Testament figure. Yes.
Oh, is he supposed to be Heracles? Or?
No, it's not Heracles, but that's actually a good point. We'll get to that in a second.
David
Yes, Sam.
and Goliath?
Yeah.
David and Goliath. Now when you call David the giant, is that correct?
No.
No, it's there's a giant that he's actually fighting. So imagine an even greater giant than this, this 25, 30 foot tall monumental nude of David. The idea of David and Goliath is a story of weakness versus strength. And that God is sort of with David, so that's what his strength is. So David really should look more like a Donatello, a boy or some other type of character that's weak and small. Now, why is it that the Republic of Florence didn't want a weak and small David to represent them?
Because they show that they have weaknesses.
Okay, so we got a little bit of maybe stylization and trying to make a symbol out of the strength of David. That is the strength that comes from God. Now, yeah, obviously you don't want to have necessarily weaklings as your main symbol. So what you do is you do that Neoplatonic thing. The beauty of God, the symbol of God's perfection of man, and you use that to stylize the human form so that you're showing the inner strength of the story. So the story is that God actually makes David stronger than the giant. And here we see it from God's perspective. That's what's being done here. This isn't from human perspective. Humans see children, a child, a weak person, but God sees a great figure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
From God's perspective, this is David, right? Now, why is that a good symbol then for the Republic of Florence over and against like some of their enemies around the states? It's been
Because it means that God sees Florence as sort of a bigger power than it actually is.
very perfect. So it's a small place, but God sees it as strong, just like this David. Lorraine.
So in the notes earlier said that the Medicis were like
Yeah, they've been
they've
kicked
like that
out.
was one of their powerful Pope families. So I think this could be
Not Pope family, but patron family.
patron family.
Yeah.
So this could be like Florence's way of like rebounding from that, and keeping their like strength.
Very good.
Strength up.
Heroism, strength, courage, and fortitude. Fortitude is a virtue, Christian virtue of strength. Do you remember that nude that was on Pisano's pulpit? That was called Fortitude. It was based on Heracles or Hercules. Yeah. This is the same structure. That's the same gesturing that the original artist produced and was thinking about when he was producing this monumental version of it. So reliance on God, weakness, humility, both these things are produced at the same time. And they're very contrasting with something like Donatello's David because they're produced for different purposes. This is political propaganda for the state. It was meant to be publicly displayed on top of a building. Donatello's David was produced by a secular community, a patron that was produced for private property inside of a garden. Very different purposes. Good free response question. Public spaces and where things are supposed to go, why it was produced for that space. So very important to think about that as well, environments, and how it relates to meaning. And in fact, that was one of my, that was my question, my 30-minute free response question back in 2003 was the nature of space in which an artwork is produced for. And I used Michelangelo's David, and I also used a work that I improperly attributed at the time, to my greatest shame. I called it the Temple of Zeus. It was actually the Pergamum altar from the Hellenistic era. Now I know it perpetually. Every time I see that work, I'm like, yeah, messed that one up on the work. But luckily, I still got my 4, so I'm good. I didn't get a 5. But you clapping for me?
Yeah.
Thank you. I made you feel good.
You should feel proud, not many freshmen get that.
Well, I wasn't a freshman.
I
I was a junior, all right. I was not a smart
It's
man.
something we're looking for. Like,
I was not a genius.
So,
My when I look at those 2 freshmen, Justin and Elena, who got 5s on that test, or dude who got a 4 as a freshman, I'm like, whoa, like how I wouldn't even.
Elena's a freak.
And so I'm pretty excited for all of you guys because you're a lot smarter than I was. I like to boast about like I was just perfect.
Justin's cool.
I came out of middle school like hating life and stuff, and so then like freshman year I'm just like I'm still like reeling from it. I'm like, I don't know anything. You know, so you guys are ahead of the game, I think.
So
Anyways,
remember pi, the entire formula. Pi.
That doesn't mean anything.
Elena.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, it's infinite though, so she knows a lot of them. You notice here too that idea from the High Renaissance of Michelangelo gazing out towards his enemy. You can see the eyes here. He's getting that implicit space, that implicit environment, developed within the work or outside the work. So good use of negative space or space, invisible space. So we got all this potential strength. This character is very Apollonian. Just like Apollo doesn't have to show any exertion of power. In the High Renaissance, we're not showing this exertion of power, we're just displaying it. He's sort of flexing in and of himself, got that perfect contrapposto, and he doesn't even have to wind up or recoil or anything, and you know that he is showing his strength. Something amazing is about to happen. All that potential is exerted in a perfectly stable and peaceful form, just like a god, okay? Which is the whole point. So kind of know that. Describing the form a little bit more carefully, subtle musculature, so we don't have someone who's super ripped, but I mean, come on. Wouldn't we all want that body? I mean, seriously. I'm jealous. So that idea, it's a very strong, but subtle musculature. So he's not a Hellenistic Hercules. He is still like an Apollonian god, like an Apollo, where they can still be light, but they're also built very strongly. And in a sense, it's the Paracletan, not the Polycletus, but the Paracletan canon, where you're kind of creating a god kind of structure based on Pericles and some of the other more sort of in that genre of sculpting. And also it has an element of sort of Lysippos, the Lysipian athlete, so characters that are sort of at rest or ready or moving kind of in that direction where they're at rest, but they're still like, I'm going to go, like I got my javelin in my hand maybe, or I'm getting ready to kind of get going, get strong. So there's this potentiality that's built into the piece. There's also this really good, you get the sense of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8 heads tall, remember that? The 8 heads of the work produces that heroic proportion, beyond normal people's proportion. These legs are way longer, arms are very long to the work. In fact, the hands are way too big, but you got to think about where it would have been found, where it would have been placed. It was supposed to be a little bit elevated, and you were supposed, when you looked at the work like this, you got all that foreshortening going on and perspective. So he wanted it to look beauteous from the bottom, and therefore he produces larger hands as a result of that, to try and keep things in proportion based on your perspective of it. He wanted to bring God's perspective of David down to you. Yes?
Okay, this has been bothering me. What is he holding?
Okay, so on his back, I don't think I have a picture. I have a picture of his butt. Let me find it. No? No? Oh, I don't have one.
He's huge.
So there's a picture of it. Now,
It was that big.
Okay.
I don't have it. It is actually a slingshot. So he actually, on his back, it's actually a contour to his back, is a rope, sort of a rope slingshot. So in the other hand here is where you see his extra pebbles that he has in his hand, along with the bottom of the slingshot, and then on the top he has the rock going on, and then the inside the contour of the slingshot. So that's sort of what's happening on the top and bottom. So he's literally holding the rock, a couple of extra stones, and he's ready to go. And I think it's like this, right? So his left hand. So he's ready to literally take it with his right hand, and I guess the potential energy is he's looking at Goliath, and then the next step would be something like, like throw knock the dude over. So that's sort of the point of the work here, just to show the readiness of David. Now, some areas are exaggerated. I mentioned the larger hands on purpose. This is important to Michelangelo. Hands are identity. So you have this also part of it, not just for proportionality when you're looking at it, but because he's showing the beauty and identity of David in his hands, in the structures that represent you. Obviously, we have that proportion form. So how does it relate to faith and aesthetic? He wants God's perspective to be your perspective. That's why he produces it a little bit off from, I guess, this photographic view of it. It's got larger hands. From the bottom, it makes more harmonious quality. What is the meaning of the work? You can go into this in depth from what we just talked about. It's now in the Accademia in Florence. You need a ticket to go see it, or else you're going to wait a really long line. And I love the way they set up the gallery, because they actually have these characters, people like this, that are actually, you can see this one, in fact, you can see the little David here kind of cropped off. You see that? A little fun fact. They have all of his later works in which he's essentially blind, producing works in the dark, just sort of feeling them out in these rough hewn and sort of these juxtaposed, unfinished sculptures in which the characters look like they're either like in carbonite, like Han Solo, or they're kind of emerging from, very Neoplatonic. But they have all of these unfinished works right next to his most finished, beauteous work right in the center. So it's just a wonderful way to experience the David. Unfortunately, they don't allow any pictures of the David. So naturally, we try to get pictures the whole time, and it's a really exciting, sort of fun thing. So maybe we'll get kicked out, that kind of thing. So we're constantly going like, take. But the only bad thing about both Florence and Rome in terms of visiting is that Italians are very rude with their, you taking pictures. And so yes, a minute. Don't even have to ask, just go. They're very rude with the idea of your experience there. So most of the time you're just sort of standing there and you're enjoying the work, and about every 20 seconds or so you hear sort of an Italian woman, a docent, on the side. She screams out with the echoing of the beautiful, the beautiful sort of arches here that's very Renaissance and proportional, the engaged pillars. Everything that's so beautiful around here. All of a sudden you hear, no photo! We're like, no photo! Photos are forbidden! I don't know, she says it in German sometimes, I don't know. Like, forbidden, Oh. Yeah. And then one of my brother-in-laws, I think this guy right here, he was whistling once. He was like kind of going like that kind of thing. She came right up to him and was like, no whistling. Got freaked out. Okay. But this picture is very rare to actually capture, so I was really proud of it because I think my wife was just like taking him from the hit. She's like, boom, like that. She got really good at that by the end. Yes.
You should say stupid Americans in that voice that you just made.
Stupid Americans. I don't know. Something like that. But this happens also in the Sistine Chapel, which you feel like is like one of the most holy sites in the Western world, The Sistine Chapel, where and it's the same thing going on just the whole time. It's like, no, but it's like a bunch of guys now because it's like the Roman Church and all that. So there's a bunch of guys now. They're like, no photo. They're screaming at you, no photo, don't videos, no photos. They're screaming at you. They're like taking people's cell phones and throwing them on the ground and stuff. They literally will grab your camera and like delete this stuff, and it's just really like, oh my gosh, dude. Anyway, so we got these are called Dying Slave. This guy looks like he's dying. He's like, oh my god, I'm dying. He's like, guys, I'm dying. Go pull up my shirt. Getting hot in here while I'm dying. I don't know, but all the little gestures, just different poses. Yeah. Huh? Dying Slave. Dying Slave. These characters here, unfinished work here, other types of Dying Slave. So, showing other elements of Michelangelo's work.
Hi.
Hello.
Is Caitlin in here?
Caitlin. What did you do, Caitlin?
This is for doing such a great job last semester.
Good job, Caitlin. Give her a round of applause, please. Yay. Last semester. All right. Just went to the bathroom. So you can find her in the bathroom if you want. Right. Reagan. We have a balloon for you. She's on the crescent. She's the one hobbling around. Michelangelo's Moses. You can't see in this work here, but Michelangelo's Moses actually has horns here. Do you see the horns there? Remember when I talked about Michelangelo having horns, or why the Moseses have horns? Did I tell you about that?
Yeah, you sit on the stuff.
It's a mistranslation of the Bible. Said that when he came down the mountain, that he had rays of light shooting out of his head, and everyone's like, ooh ah. But in the Greek to the Latin, so the Greek translation to the Latin, turned out it was well, they translated it wrong. They said that it was horns of light coming out of his head. It said, horns of light popping out of his head. So then all the pictures of Moses from that point on, after it was mistranslated in the Latin text, it was like literally these golden horns popping out of it. That guy, check it out. God turned me into a satyr. Yeah. So he's like,
He looks like Tom Hanks from
I'm
Castaway.
half goats now. Huh?
He looks like
Tom Hanks from Castaway?
Yeah.
A little bit longer of a beard. Give him some credit, man. It takes a long time to produce something. It's so cool too because he's got it like all like intertwined with this epic beard, dude. He's like the perfect hipster. He's got the hand all like gripped in all these big locks of hair. So I love that gesture. He's sort of like grabbing his big forked beard and just sort of going, yes, I am Moses. Look at these arms, dude. This dude's jacked. You see that? He does not skip leg day either. I mean, he is buff. And so Michelangelo's producing these buff forms. Regan. Reagan. You got your, they gave it to you in the bathroom, really? Yeah. Well, Reagan, let's get a round of applause. You did a great job. Just enjoy. Okay, yeah.
No, we don't. We actually don't continue with your plan.
Safely stand. Slap her.
There.
Guys, I'm going to pop your balloon.
Okay, continue.
You're gonna Hulk out right now. We have 10 minutes. There's more?
That whole stack.
I know. Here you go. Okay.
Yeah, we're Jesus all reaching.
You guys ready for a 10-minute time, right?
No.
Okay, then shut your mouths.
No.
I got to get you to Sistine Chapel here, and I'm sorry about the distractions. So Sistine Chapel, we get to that painting element of Michelangelo's career. Something to say about the coloring of it before I show you an exploration of the actual space. The work is produced with a color theory called Cagnate. So write that word down. It's a very important high Renaissance description of color. Cagnate looks like this. Yes, but in very specific ways. So to describe Cagnate would be to say something like, you don't use blacks, you don't use browns, you don't use any type of grays, nothing that is desaturated in nature. You need to have primary colors. And no, Justin, it is not racist. It is just a description of colorful quality. So needing to have the highest chroma possible.
Didn't they call us colors? That's kind of like a reverse.
No,
thing.
we have, and so instead of shadows using blacks or gray colors, which desaturate the chroma or the highness of the color content, instead he produces a juxtaposed high chroma color that acts as a shadow in relation to the high chroma lighter color. So there's differences here between chroma, which is the saturation of color, and the lightness or the hue of the work, meaning how much white it has or how much on the spectrum it looks like a light color. For instance, yellow versus a sort of blue. Now, a yellow and a deep blue are both very high chroma, but one looks brighter in relation to the other, doesn't it? If you were to see a navy blue and a yellow together, one would look darker, one would look lighter, but they're not actually lighter or darker. It's just the relation of the colors. So what you do here is exactly what is done right in this space here. Do you see that? This is a great example of Cañonte. Now, yellow is the chroma of the midtone, and then we have a white here that shows the highlight, the blown out highlight of the form. But we go from that to the high chroma yellow, but you don't go into black. You don't go into gray. What color is this?
Green.
Green. So he actually uses green as a shadow stand-in. Now, green is still high chroma or low chroma? It's still very high chroma. It's very colorful. So, that's an example of what I'm talking about. And in fact, all this character here is in a high chroma red. It's a little bit with orange, like an orange quality, and that shows that he's in more of a shadow than this red part of the undercloak. So you see, ultimately taken together, red, yellow, and blue with these green and orange underneath here, we get incredibly saturated, colorful quality. So this is very, Mr. Campbell loves bright, vivid, contrasting colors, guys.
Who's Mr.
So he would love the Sistine Chapel. Here's my history teacher. Yeah. Some of you know who I'm talking about. Terracotta.
Oh, that's my
History
that's
teacher.
my,
Little gray beard.
that's my coach.
Loved Cañonte. That was what he wanted everyone to do all the time. In fact, when you didn't do it, he'd write BVCC on your word. And it means bright, vivid, contrasting colors. And I would always remember that. Yes?
What about the parts that are actually in the shadow, like gray?
So what you mean, like when the color is actually meant to be gray? What you notice that even these characters here, if I were to take this panel of what should be gray, this sort of Grisaille is fake sculpture, right? And I would put that chroma up against real, like a real like marble and a whiter light, you would see that this has quite a bit more warmth to it than what you would otherwise think compared to these other areas.
But I mean
So it's all about relationship of color. Yes?
The one like over the guy's shoulder.
This guy right here?
Yeah.
Again, you have mostly orange going on with the work here. And you have some shading here because it's a coarse shadow, but the shading is actually produced with a very, very dark orange, as opposed to a graying out or a black or some other type of secondary desaturated tone. So it's actually not desaturated. It has very strong warmth to it. It still has a temperature that's high and a chroma that's saturated. So very good. And it develops an overall brightness. And this is the clear part right there. That's what you need to know about Cañonte. It's very different than Smato. So Leonardo Smato versus Michelangelo's Cañonte, different styles. But Leonardo was working with oils, and Michelangelo's using what? What painting style? So it's an F. Frescoing. This is a fresco, right? A blonde, wet fresco. Write down those basic facts, and we will start tomorrow with an exploration of the space of Sistine Chapel. We're talking about 5,800 square feet of ceiling space. Every major panel in the Old Testament is described in these 5,800 square feet. In the center is all of the book of Genesis and the 7 days of creation. And on the sides, we have all the major and minor prophets of the Old Testament. It's basically a display of God's creative work and is God's revelation. That's what the sort of ceiling space is representing. The original designs that were given before the work was commissioned to Michelangelo were supposed to be very abstract, like geometric patterns, kind of sort of symbolizing God's creation. But when the High Renaissance comes into full force, Michelangelo says, no, we need to do something amazing with our understanding of the beauty of the human form. And so this work is literally littered with bodies, naked bodies, all over the ceiling to show God's creative action. Funny story is that he only assented to this project in hopes of continuing his sculpture, his sculpting. They said, look, we're going to get you a 2-for-1 discount. If you want to keep sculpting the Julius's tomb, the Moses tomb that we just showed you, that I kind of skipped over because we were distracted, you got to do our Sistine Chapel for it. He's like, all right, I'll do it. Because he wanted to sculpt so bad. So this work is sort of a secondary to his real, what he thought again of his real work, which was sculpting. Of course, it's the one that he's most known for. And then the work itself that is most famous within it is the central panel, which we will talk about as well, in the creation of Adam. Know a little bit about Sistine Chapel starting tomorrow.